To eliminate the Great Flood, James Hutton put forward a theory that the same gradual geological processes have always been at work, at uniform rates over deep time, so that no catastrophic events, especially the Great Flood, were needed to explain Earth history. The present was the key to the past, and this was not only applied to geological processes but also to weather and climate. All mountains were pushed up slowly at the same pace over millions of years, and all canyons were slowly eroded, sand grain by sand grain, by the small rivers or streams and normal rainfall over thousands and millions of years. Laplace and Kant assembled the nebular hypothesis, which claimed the Earth had begun as a chunk of material thrown off of the original gaseous cloud that cooled into the sun. Thus, the early Earth began covered in a sea of boiling magma, so that it was a long time before that magma cooled into a hardened surface and continents, before water could appear, and then eventually life could form in the ocean or in a warm little pond somewhere. Charles Lyell adopted Hutton's ideas and promoted Hutton as a great scientist. He demonstrated how uniformitarianism made dating geological features, like canyons, easy. You just figure the original mass of material that's been removed, measure the current erosion rate per year of the stream or river passing through, and then do the math. He played a large role in formulating the geologic column. Ages were assigned to each strata, and index fossils were identified as unique to each strata, and then you could use fossils to identify and date strata, while strata could be used to date fossils. Geological and climatic uniformitarianism provided a slowly and uniformly changing Earth for Darwin to develop a similar story of biological uniformitarianism, with no catastrophic interruptions to interfere with gradual biological change. Uniformitarian geology, the nebular hypothesis, and Darwinism seemed to provide a plausible alternative to what the Bible said about the Earth and the development of life. The Enlightenment agenda caused uniformitarianism to become academic orthodoxy.
Uniformitarianism is the cornerstone on which the science of geology is erected. Lyell established the idea of evolution as the only reasonable interpretation of geological facts, and his elaboration of Hutton's doctrines still constitute the very foundation of geologic science.
What could be wrong with this? The rapid spread and popularity of the Enlightenment's new stories could be attributed to one of two factors: either how well they explained available evidence, or how much some wanted any plausible-sounding story to replace the hated biblical explanation. Over time, it has become apparent that it was the second option that caused these new stories to spread and to become the new orthodoxy for Western civilization. First of all, recent discoveries have demonstrated that the nebular hypothesis was wrong. The early Earth had lots of water from the beginning, if not covered with it, as Genesis 1:6-10 said. Evidence has also come to light that the early Earth's climate was much like Genesis 2:5-6 describes, a temperate or rainforest climate worldwide, which at some point changed dramatically. We will focus on both of these issues in separate videos. Second, the late Harvard geologist Stephen Jay Gould wrote several important articles on the validity of the entire uniformitarian scenario, noting several key points. Uniformitarian geology was only useful for eliminating the supernatural, in effect the Bible, from people's thinking about Earth history. Otherwise, it should now be dropped because it does not fit the evidence, even the evidence known in Hutton and Lyell's time. In two other articles, Gould unmasked both Hutton and Lyell as amateurs who were interested in geology but did not know what they were talking about and were more anxious to discredit the Bible and promote the Enlightenment agenda. Hutton was a medical doctor who pushed a story of anti-catastrophism and ignored inconvenient evidence. More informed experts in Europe ignored Hutton's story as foolishness because they were aware of the evidence for catastrophic events in Earth history. Lyell was a skilled lawyer who manhandled the evidence to promote Hutton's distorted idea. The catastrophists that he ridiculed were much more in tune with the available evidence. However, Enlightenment promoters portrayed both Hutton and Lyell as great geologists, and their un-Bible story of Earth history became orthodoxy. How did uniformitarian dogma distort how evidence was interpreted? Lyell dated Niagara Falls as 35,000 years old, figuring the falls had eroded 7 miles from the Queenston Bluffs, 35,000 feet, at 1 foot of erosion per year. However, when he visited the falls in 1841, the locals said that the falls were eroding at around 3 feet per year, with large chunks breaking loose at times and shaking the ground. Large chunks breaking loose were catastrophic events, not gradual uniform erosion, so Lyell ignored that information. Later annual studies showed that the falls were eroding at 4 to 5 feet per year, which brought the likely age of the falls down to 7 to 9,000 years, only 1/4 of the age Lyell had imagined. Adopting Lyell's way of thinking, Charles Darwin dated the Weald, an area in southeast England between parallel chalk escarpments, 5 times the age modern geologists would assign it. Materialistic naturalism needs lots of time for gradualism, portraying nature as only changing at slow, uniform rates without catastrophes, and Lyell and Darwin were doing their best to provide as much age and time as possible.
Gradualism, the idea that all change must be smooth, slow, and steady, was never read from the rocks. It was, primarily, a prejudice of 19th century liberalism, facing a world in revolution.
Stephen Jay Gould has not been the only voice calling for a revision in how Earth history should be understood. Edgar Heilman noted the same problem. Uniformitarianism does not represent the evidence for both gradual and rapid change in Earth history, and should not be taught in the classical manner.
There are simply too many uncertainties developing in the geological sciences to continue teaching the doctrine of uniformitarianism in the classical manner.
E.G. Nisbet, an expert in Archean or early Earth geology, has noted that even the assumption of uniformitarianism, slow uniform change, is suspect. Catastrophic earth-changing events are real. They happen, but have not been given serious attention. While there are long periods when erosion and weathering operate at slow and gradual speeds, there are also catastrophic events in which a lot of change can happen in a short time. Noted British geologist Derek Ager said it simply: hurricanes, floods, and tsunamis may do more to change the landscape in an hour or a day than the ordinary processes do in 1,000 years. And then there are other things. Torrential rain can dramatically multiply the effects of drainage and erosion, even to the point of producing catastrophic flooding. There are landslides. Big chunks can break loose from mountains and coastal bluffs. Then there's earthquakes. Volcanic eruptions can deposit large amounts of new material in a fairly short time. On the other hand, it does not take eons for lava to cool and become soil. I was at the Volcano National Park on the Big Island of Hawaii, standing around the large relief map of the island when someone asked the park ranger present how long it took for birds to drop seeds on new lava and the roots of plants to start breaking up and turning the lava into soil. You could almost hear chins hit the floor when the ranger said, "Within a week." We have been indoctrinated to understand Earth history in terms of gradualism and great age alone. The evidence indicates that large-scale things can and have occurred rapidly. Instant islands, anyone? Observations confirm that islands can be created by volcanoes in a much shorter time than most would now imagine. Observers watched the island of Surtsey come into being near Iceland in just a few years, with geological features and even vegetation that uniformitarianism would assert requires centuries, millennia, or millions of years. As we noted earlier, Stephen Jay Gould admitted that the main purpose of Hutton and Lyell's uniformitarianism was to remove supernatural explanations, in effect the Bible, from the way nature is understood. However, forbidding biblical ideas does not change the reality of the evidence. So with the Bible removed from the discussion of Earth history, modern geologists are again seeing the evidence for catastrophic events and faster geological change all over the place. What was Georgia farmland during the Civil War has eroded into Providence Canyon since then, a period of only 160 years. A rough channel was cut over a weekend when a large amount of water was released from a reservoir in Texas. Some have suggested that this same process could also have been what gouged out the bulk of the Grand Canyon as two large inland lakes emptied suddenly. Another example is the channeled scablands and the Columbia River Gorge in the Pacific Northwest. Thanks to the work of J. Harland Bretz and Joseph Pardee of the U.S. Geological Survey, these features are now understood as being created rapidly by catastrophic flooding as Lakes Missoula and Bonneville suddenly emptied. They were hassled by office-bound superiors in the U.S. Geological Survey for challenging the uniformitarian explanation, but Bretz and Pardee were out in the field looking at the evidence. Later, one of these officials actually looked at the terrain and admitted, "How could I have been so wrong?" Well, the answer was simple: embracing and promoting established orthodoxy rather than looking at the evidence. The same orthodoxy mindset continues with many committed to uniformitarian geology, the nebular hypothesis, and Darwinism. The volcanic eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state in 1980 provided observable evidence at how quickly the landscape was drastically changed. Hundreds of feet of stratified deposits were formed in a short amount of time. Then mud flows and a breached dam event produced a canyon system in an afternoon. Contrary to uniformitarian dogma, major geologic features can be produced rapidly by catastrophic events and processes. Sedimentary rock forms from material settling out of water overlaying a landscape. Niels Stenson, usually known as Nicholas Steno, was a Danish scientist who did some early work on sedimentary rock strata deposits and erosion, and he was a major influence on James Hutton. Steno believed that all strata were deposited, top down, by gravity settling material out of calm oceans overlaying the continents. Because sedimentary strata is so widespread, it indicates that the continents have been covered by water before, and fossils, which are always found in sedimentary rock, indicates that a lot of life forms were killed and buried in these strata. However, there is now experimental evidence that strata can also form sideways, as moving water picks up and redeposits soil, gravel, and anything else in its way. Examples would be tidal surges, flooding, and tsunamis. As for catastrophic tsunamis, geologists and others are now seeing evidence for watery catastrophes all over the place. The meteorite that allegedly wiped out the dinosaurs may have created a mile-high tsunami that would have washed over all of the continents. Robert Ballard says that a major flood in the Mediterranean and Black Sea area covered 100,000 square miles. A feature called a chevron suggests a 600-foot-high tsunami swept over Madagascar. The British Isles were once a part of the European mainland, connected by an area now called Doggerland, but they were separated when this area was submerged as a result of a major flooding event. A number of discoveries have confirmed the fact that continents have been underwater. Marine fossils, shellfish, whales, sharks, mosasaurs have been found far inland all over the world. Marine fossils have even been found on mountaintops. The nebular hypothesis was formulated to contradict Genesis 1:6-10, which said the early earth was covered with water and then the land appeared. There is now accumulating evidence that the Bible was correct. Uniformitarian geology was formulated to contradict the catastrophic Genesis flood, which held that the continents were covered with water and many life forms were killed. Noted geologists have admitted major problems with it. Accumulating evidence now confirms that the continents have been catastrophically flooded and extinction-level events have occurred. Sedimentary strata with many buried and preserved life forms suggests that something like the Genesis flood did occur. And we have accumulating evidence that the Earth's climate was once temperate, if not a rainforest, worldwide, as Genesis 2:5 and 6 indicate, with dinosaurs and tropical vegetation at the poles. Then it changed dramatically for some reason. What could have happened that would have changed the Earth's climate, rearranged the surface, and covered the continents with lots of sedimentary strata filled with millions of buried life forms? The Enlightenment wanted to discredit and eliminate the Judeo-Christian worldview because of what Christendom had produced in European history. That concern had some validity. However, in the obsession to discredit the Bible, it developed erroneous explanations to contradict biblical ideas about nature that were not in harmony with evidence available then, or with evidence that continues to be discovered.
For more than a century, many geologists have been stifled, the range of their hypotheses falsely channeled and restricted, by a belief that proper method includes an a priori commitment to gradual change.